Slay the Spire 2, Anita's name brought fire.
Burn it to the ground, cry reviews filled with ire.
Gamers feel betrayed while the media tries to spin.
But there is more than Anita. What else lies within? Oh boy, this is a doozy.
If you guys don't already know, if you've been living under a rock, Slay the Spire 2, a very successful game, came out after Slay the Spire 1. This is a sequel to the original game. And it was doing pretty well, and it's doing great, except recently it was found, and this was something people do for a while, but it was recently more publicized, is that people found that Anita Sarkeesian, the person who made Feminist Frequency, was trying to got mad about boob armor and The Mandalorian, all this kind of stuff.
That Anita Sarkeesian.
She's mentioned in the credits, which made people very upset, and people felt betrayed. And as you can see from the ratings, it didn't go well for Casey Yano, Megacrit, and Slay the Spire. However, if that wasn't bad enough,
it gets worse.
What you guys may not know is in the past, we have done a lot of work on Wings Interactive. We have an entire playlist on Wings Interactive that you can go watch to get the full lowdown. But one of the things that we found is Wings Interactive, which funds games for marginalized gender developers, is literally being funded not just by Outer Sloth, which is a branch of Inner Sloth, which is the same people who make Among Us, was also funded by Casey Yano of Slay the Spire. Now, it wasn't something that I had necessarily a reason to look into at least as much away.
It was something that we did mention in one of our finding videos.
After digging into it more to try to understand what's going on here, I found some, let's just say, pretty concerning things that we need to go over. It seems that Casey Yano has partnered with a mysterious indie friend. That's how they're said, like an indie, well-known, loved indie friend who's mysterious. That's literally, we're going to read the article where this mentions it, right?
Literally, the person is never mentioned by name.
And they've partnered and gave money to Outer Sloth, who then gave money to Wings. And the person who I believe this is explains why Anita Sarkeesian is in the credits here. Because this person is someone you may know of. This person is someone who's notorious for being one of the people involved in the original Gamergate.
Shall we get into it then?
Eileen Mary Holowka. Now, if you're familiar, if you think that name is familiar, it's because it is. You may remember her because Gamergate started off by Zoe Quinn accusing Alex Holowka. He was the person who made Night in the Woods, and Zoe Quinn was the person who accused him. And in other words, long story short...
And led him to end himself.
Well, it's complicated. We'll get into that. But in other words, it's one of the things that kicked off the original Gamergate. But before we get into it and explain our reasoning as to why this person is the person we believe, I want to make very clear. We cannot confirm this is the person, but we will be going through data that strongly suggests that it is the person. Announcing Outer Sloth and more money.
Hello. Since revealing the existence of our indie game fund Outer Sloth this year, we signed an additional 3 games to our roster, leaving us at a healthy total of 13 games since our inception. But that wasn't the only thing we gained. As time went on, we had some extremely generous indie buddies who were interested in pitching in to help cool indie games get made with dev-friendly terms. However, they didn't want to deal with the hassle of setting things up, fielding applications, and becoming so overloaded with the process that it interfered with their own game making. So, we opened up Outer Sloth to them. Please welcome in Casey Yano from Megacrit, creators of Slay the Spire and Slay the Spire 2, and a mysterious and beloved indie friend who wishes to remain anonymous.
Wait a minute. So they're a mysterious, beloved indie friend who wishes to not be mentioned. Why would you not want to be mentioned with Casey Yano? We'll get to that. Well, here's the thing, though, guys. We know one of the places they've given money to. And one of the places is as follows, and I'm going to read this. Ahem. Wings, the investment fund committed to funding games by women and other gender marginalized developers. Yes, I didn't stutter when I said that before.
Blech.
Has raised investment from Outer Sloth, the studio behind Among Us, and Casey Yano, the developer behind Slay the Spire. They are joining Landfall Games, Wings' first investor, which, by the way, they're now announcing that Landfall did fund them, which don't understand why it's a problem that we pointed that out then, but okay.
Yeah. Why did you have to delete your internet history overnight when we discovered that, huh?
We now understand what's going on here, but where does this go from this to Eileen Mary Holowka? So I decided to go look on the announcement post that was made by Outer Sloth on LinkedIn to see who had actually posted about it. Because I was curious. I figured that maybe whoever it was might be involved. And what do you know? Eileen Mary Holowka was one of the people who reposted it. Now, clearly that's evidence. No, it's not.
There is
However, there are a lot of factors that we considered here, but another couple things to point out before we move on. Eileen Mary Holowka, you might not recognize her necessarily. As you said, you might recognize her name from being mentioned with Gamergate and whatever, the beginning. But one of the things you may not know is she is the co-founder and a co-executive director at Baby Ghosts, which also created Weird Ghosts and which was the initial funding for Sweet Baby Inc. That's right. So you could see her mentioning Kim Belair and mentioning that How to Survive Harassment was redone by featuring cohort 3 participant Kim Belair. In other words, Kim Belair was and Sweet Baby Inc. was one of the studios they funded in their third cohort. What does this prove? What are we going to do with this information? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do with this information. We are going to break it down for you piece by piece and explain exactly why we believe it is this person. I have created this graphic. Who is the Outer Sloth beloved indie friend? Evaluating Eileen Mary Holowka against all known public criteria. So Outer Sloth announced that we've been working with a beloved indie friend who wishes to stay anonymous to set up a fund for smaller indie game developers. What this implies is that the person is respected and trusted in the indie gaming community, is experienced with funding pitches or developer support, is connected to the indie ecosystem and its challenges, and is recognizable enough that anonymity is meaningful. So now we're going to break down that into 8 different criteria and why Eileen Mary Holowka matches this so well and how much of a percentage of a chance we believe that it is this person. So let's go first. Recognizable indie insider. They are the co-founder of Baby Ghost, a nonprofit indie support organization. They have a long-time presence in indie game spaces since early 2010s. They're a regular speaker, panelist, and community leader. And how it fits the role is they're well-known and respected amongst indie circles. Anonymity would be meaningful if her involvement were public, because the fact that she was involved with the initial, stuff with Gamergate and Zoe Quinn and all this stuff, it would make her very controversial. So her being anonymous makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Next.
What is next?
Trusted and beloved socially. Is widely regarded as a supportive, empathetic, and community-focused, and is known for mental health advocacy and developer well-being work, and is consistently described positively by peers. So they have a strong reputation for kindness, advocacy, and integrity, which matches the beloved description. Okay.
Number 3.
Funding support ecosystem adjacent. They work at the intersection of indie devs and funding support resources. They focus on connecting devs with grant programs and sustainability resources. In other words, they're deeply embedded in the infrastructure that supports indie developers financially and operationally.
4. Involved
in mentorship and incubator co-op structures. Is an active in mentorship and peer support programs, helps run incubator-like initiatives and community care structures through Baby Ghosts, and builds cooperative community-driven infrastructure. So directly involved with mentorship and cooperative support systems for indie developers. Seems like a great match for this whole thing.
Now explain number 5.
Number 5, controversy sensitive enough for anonymity to matter, is vocal on social justice, equity, and inclusion, so much so that people actually were mad at her because apparently it seemed like at the time, again, there's no confirmation, but it seemed like Eileen was more worried about how Alex's death would impact her social justice virtue signaling rather than the fact that he passed away. But that is, again, up to speculation. Indie game culture remains politically polarized. Public association could invite backlash or politicization of the fund. So anonymity protects both the initiative and her from predictable online controversy,
which she clearly needs.
Yes.
Number 6.
6, publicly connected to overlapping orgs and ecosystems. It's connected to many indie support networks, conferences, and advocacy groups. Works closely with devs, organizations, and programs across the indie ecosystem. In other words, a broad public ecosystem overlap with the exact communities Outer Sloth aims to help.
Number 7.
Operationally suited for pitch/funding evaluation, is experienced in reviewing applications, grant programs, and dev support, understands what makes pitches and projects viable, and is experienced in resource allocation and program design, has the exact skill set needed to help elevate pitches and structure for funding devs.
Number 8.
And last but not least, plausibly close enough to Casey/Outer Sloth culture-wise. A longtime indie dev and player of indie games, supportive of small teams and creator-first values, publicly aligned with empathy, fairness, and community, and values visible in Outer Sloth's culture. In other words, values and indie philosophy align strongly with Casey and Outer Sloth's public approach. The conclusion,
based on this evidence we have found, suggests that Eileen Mary Holowka is, in fact, the mysterious friend mentioned by Outer Sloth.
with a 92% likelihood. Again, we cannot confirm it 100%, but given the fact of where they're located in the indie sphere and the fact that this would indicate that Casey Yano is close friends with Eileen Mary Holowka and that she matches the criteria of this mystery friend, and that they're funding Wings, and Eileen Mary Holowka is the person who's in charge of Baby Ghosts, which also funded Sweet Baby Inc. All of the pieces fit so well. Why the fit is so strong is because it matches all the 8 criteria. There are no other public figures that fits all of them this cleanly. I did consider Anita Sarkeesian.
But she's already credited publicly in Slay the Spire too.
Yes, and you'd think if she was a mystery friend, you just write her as mystery friend, right? Explains why anonymity would be necessary, and explains why she would be the right person for this role. In other words, it is a strong likelihood, the estimated likelihood of her fitting this criteria is a 92%. Meaning, if in layman's terms, Casey Yano is friends and working with Eileen Mary Holowka, one of the people who is the sister of Alex Holowka, the person who made Night in the Woods, who's Zoe Quinn, accused of sexual harassment and all these kinds of things, which led to Alex Holowka, ending his life, committing suicide, which started the first Gamergate. You think Baby Ghost you thought Anita Sarkeesian was gone. She's not.
Nope.
You think Baby Ghost is gone. They're not.
Evidently
they are funding their next cohort right now and have branched out and now have an Alberta cohort as well. So in other words, we thought we were winning, and in some ways, maybe we are. But if this is true, what this proves is that Casey Yano is close enough friends with people involved in the same sphere of Anita Sarkeesian, which would explain exactly why Anita was mentioned in the credits of Slay the Spire 2. Again, keep in mind, we cannot confirm this. All this stuff that's happening now started with Zoe Quinn and Alex Holowka, and now we're finding out that, guess what? Baby Ghost is still active also, which, again, was pretty easy to find, but is still active. Anita Sarkeesian is still active. And not only that, but there is a 92% chance that Eileen Mary Holowka is involved directly with Casey Yano from Slay the Spire, which would explain why Anita was there as well.
You're welcome, Internet.
advice obscure. Here's your dark solace with humor as a cure.